Several individuals.
Back here too.
Yeah, well, in 2010, so almost before you,
okay.
but almost there, Maureen. Lots of individuals, advocates, guardians, services, CCBs, single entry points. They also provided recommendations to the departments, looking at taking away or assigning information and referral responsibility from the CCBs to another agency. Another way to do waiting list administration, separating case management from other entities. Those are all going on in 2010. And then in 2014, about the time that I joined the departments, we created a conflict-free case management task group. This group started to look at choice of case management agency, but by the time this group had our second meeting, a final rule from the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services came out requiring a separation of case management from the provision of direct services for all home and community-based services waivers. So the charge of this task group that originally started changed from just choice of case management agency to how do we comply with this federal requirement to separate case management from direct services. This task group at the time is very specific to community center boards and individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that's where the focus of this work was. The department knowing that at some point we would have to look at all of our waivers to ensure that everybody was in compliance. This task group met throughout 2014, provided three main recommendations to the department. That agencies or CCBs at that point would provide services only, CCBs would provide case management only, or they would provide both but not to the same. They would continue to be able to provide both to the same individual as long as that individual went through a very long or informed consent opt-out of conflict-free. So those were the three recommendations to the department. The department responded to those recommendations that the first two would comply with federal regulations, so an agency providing services only or case management only, and that the third does not comply with federal regulation. That the regulation that came out from CMS did not allow for an individual to opt out of a conflict-free case management environment. So that happened. And then in 2015, House Bill 151318 was passed and required the department to develop a plan to implement conflict-free case management in Colorado. The department was able to contract with Navigate Consulting to help develop that plan in conjunction with community center boards, individuals, guardians, parents, providers. Single entry points were included in some of that work. That plan was developed and submitted to the General Assembly on July 1 of 2016. Next slide, please. Thank you. After that, in the last legislative session, so in 2017, the JVC sponsored a bill, House Bill 171343. This was specific to the statutes regarding individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and the community center boards. But what this legislation did was create a definition of conflict-free case management. It added a definition of eligible for home and community-based services. I don't know how many people know, but the CCBs don't also just serve people in our HCBS waivers. There are other state-funded services that they provide for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, so we have to separate those pieces out. And it also changed the definition of interdisciplinary team. The definition of conflict-free case management includes a reference to the federal regulation requiring the separation, and states that it's the same agency who provides both case management and direct services cannot do that for the same person. So there's that. And then the definition for the IDT or interdisciplinary team changed to align more closely with the person-centered service planning rules from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, stating that in the development of an HCBS service plan, it's developed by the individual receiving services, their case manager, and then anyone else that individual wants to have at their support plan meeting. So that happened there. Next slide, please. So again, House Bill 171343 prevents the same agency from providing both case management and direct services to the same individual. It also required the department to decide which options CCBs at that point would have to come into compliance with this regulation. Those four options are case management only, so providing just case management, providing direct services only, providing both but not to the same individual, or discontinuing to provide both case management and direct services. Those were the four options. Next slide, please. House Bill 17-1343 also requires business continuity plans from all the community center boards. It allows, the federal rule that came out from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services also allows for a rule exception in geographic areas where there is no other willing or qualified entity to provide case management. That is something that the department has to evaluate and then request from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. It is not something that we just going to say, yes, this can happen in this area. So this legislation that passed last year also required CCDs who were seeking that rule exception to submit that request to the department by July 1st of 2017. On June 9th of 2017, the department sent those 4 options for compliance along with the information necessary for a rule exception request to be submitted so that they can have that information ahead of time. Another piece of the legislation is it requires that all individuals receiving HCBS must be enrolled in the conflict-free system by by 2022, June 30th, 2022. The business continuity plan that is required from the CCBs was sent out to all CCBs on December 29th of 2017, the requirements for those plans. They must be received to the department by July 1 of 2018, and the department has until June 30th of 2019 to review those for adequacy. And then CCBs have until June 30th of 2020 to make updates to those based off requirements for the department or changes that may go through the system that could potentially impact what they've decided. Next slide, please. Thank you. So next steps, as I stated earlier, well, the task group in 2014 and the statute changes last year were specific to the CCBs and the IDD, individuals with IDD. The federal regulation that came out in 2014 is applicable to all home and community-based services waivers, so it's not just for the 3 waivers provided for through the community center boards. So the department has to work to align all HCBS waivers and agencies with the same requirements, which would be the rule exceptions, business continuity plans. Other pieces from the legislation of last year required the department to develop case management agency and case manager qualifications. So that work has been underway for the last few months. There were stakeholder involvement the end of November to say this is what the department is thinking those qualifications should be. Please react. Those were held in 4 areas across the state along with the webinar. We had representation from individuals, families, guardians, advocates, CCBs, and single entry points in all of our meetings. So we appreciate all that. As I said, CCBs received information for rule exception requests. Those have been in receipt from the department. The business continuity plan requirements have gone out. The qualifications is where we are currently. Those qualifications are what the department feels should be the potential final qualifications were emailed to all stakeholders who are on our list. What was that date, Heather? It was 2 weeks ago? Almost 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
So about
It'll
2
be
weeks
2 weeks
ago.
tomorrow.
Right, thank you. So 2 weeks ago tomorrow, allowing people to review those qualifications and provide additional feedback to the department before we go forward to try to make those as more final as possible. So those have gone out. And like I said, we are working now to align this across all of our HCBS waivers, which impacts all of our current case management agencies. Next slide, please. Yes.
I read the 3 documents that went out on the conflict-free case management and what a new, not CCB case management company might look like. And some areas were kind of open-ended as to what the requirements were actually going to end up looking like. Is that going to get firmed up at some point, or is that going to be kind of left up to the discretion of the department, or how's that going to look?
You weren't here for introductions, so could you
Oh, I'm so sorry. Elizabeth Braun, Active Community Access.
So it's a little tricky for me to answer without knowing maybe what specific pieces you are referring to, but the hope was that what we sent out, the department thought was based off of the recommendations from our contractor, from all the stakeholder feedback. The department took all that information and said, this is what we think should be those qualifications for a case management agency and a case manager. That's what was sent out. Based off feedback that we get, changes could be made, or if people feel that certain pieces of language aren't strong enough or are too strong, we would look at those and then make decisions on how to address each of those qualifications based off feedback.
So I was kind of looking at it from like if there was a 1 or 2 case manager company, would that look like? I wasn't sure how that fit into the overall outlook.
So to be a case manager, I believe the qualification we sent out said they had to be employed by a case management agency. So anyone who wants to be a case manager would have to be employed by an agency that meets the qualifications that become final. So if it were 1 or 2 people that formed an agency and met those qualifications, then most likely they would be a case management agency, again, if they meet all those qualifications.
I understand the intent of separating out the case management from the direct services. Is there also the intent to separate out the functional eligibility determination from the case management from the direct service? So there's actually 3, or talk me through that.
Sure. So what House Bill 171343 also did last year was separate the eligibility, level of care, functional eligibility that you're talking about from case management as well. In efforts to start aligning that work with the no wrong door pilots that are occurring across our state. I don't know how familiar people are with no wrong door, so I don't want to necessarily go down that hole, but yes, there are 3 distinct functions or activities. Those administrative tasks, which are eligibility determination, functional eligibility, versus case management, which is assessing needs, developing a service plan, monitoring those services and the health and safety of individuals, and then referring people for services, and then the provision of those actual services. So yes, that is occurring.
So the current function of, like in single entry points, where the case managers determine the functional, or do the assessment and then send it in to determine the functional eligibility, and then also our case managers, you're saying that the intent is for that to go away? Those
functions to be separate, the same agency can do both. So for the single entry points, for example, they will continue, or I'll use CCBs because that's what we have right now. So sure. CCBs will continue to do that eligibility, the DD determination, which is something they do, and then that 100.2 assessment. At the point that a person is ready financially and through that level of care to begin services, there will be a referral to a third-party entity to help that person choose their case management agency, which may end up being the CCB if the CCB determines they want to provide case management and the person wants to go back there. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a point that it wasn't on our side, is that third-party entity to help with choice of case management agency. So for a single entry point, there would be the eligibility piece. Once they're eligible, third-party entity, if single entry points want to continue being case management agencies,
they could do that.
They could do that, and then that person could go back.
They could do that for the same person?
Yes.
Any other questions?
So, no, go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering if you guys have analyzed how that might have an impact on a single entry point, for instance. Is it going to change the practice significantly at a county level if you have a third-party entity coming in after the eligibility determination has been made? Do you guys sort of like play that out?
We're starting to, from the single entry point side, start to have some of those conversations. It's not been fully played out. And there are some conversations going on with some of the single entry point administrators and things like that to talk through that too.
And that change is not based on the federal regulations, or is it also required?
That is not based on the federal regulation. The federal regulation is specific to separation of case management, which is service and service provision.
So I'm Tracy from Mesa County. I think that is a huge missing piece in your presentation, because that is really how it impacts those counties right now that are delivering the single entry point program. So we definitely get and understand the separation of service provision. But when you try to carve that out, what we heard yesterday is that we would even have to apply and become a Medicaid provider then to continue the case management function. And then that is what would drive that revenue stream or reimbursement would be actually Medicaid billable activity. So that's pretty huge. I think because not every county delivers that, we're challenged to come together as a voice to really look at it. So I appreciate your efforts in coming and addressing everybody, because many of these issues get kicked off down the road and then it's just a very singular conversation between a county and HIPAA, which is a hard conversation to have. I had one other point that I was going to make. It escaped me. Oh, the way this was originally presented to us was that it was just, might be an issue for a few counties who, because of the lack of resources in their county or their region, are actually doing all three functions. So a county may be doing the functional eligibility, the case management, and they look around and say, all right, nobody else is here, so we'll go ahead and provide those services. And it's turned into a much bigger issue for them. So I would just appreciate this not being swept under the rug as just a little minor tweak in alignment with federal legislation, because it's not.
You mean the rural
It's big.
exemption? Rural exemption? I think you're referring to the rural exemption.
Well, I'm talking about this
The whole
whole
thing.
conflict-free case management issue. It's a big deal.
It is, and my intent was definitely not to act like this was not a big deal. I think one of the slides that I mentioned or that we went over was aligning HCBS across all of our waivers. We've got a lot of different ways in which these different activities are performed across the waivers. So the department is looking to align those processes across waivers so that no matter which waiver I'm going to or which entity I'm going to, the processes and how that all happens are the same, and regardless of my age or disability, it's the same. We've got a very fractured or segregated system right now. If I've got these disabilities, this is how everything happens. If I've got these disabilities, this is how it happens. So this is also work to align that as much as possible across all the waivers and populations.
So is Tracy correct that the case management a case management agency will become a Medicaid provider?
There are no decisions that have been made on that. The department is exploring the best option for how case management is provided and reimbursed. The federal government allows for 3 options right now. We use all 3 of those in our state, depending on the waiver. So we're exploring to see if there's a way that we can do it with one, and so that everyone's getting and being reimbursed for the same type of case management. But no final decisions have been made on what that looks like.
Sorry, what's the process for making those decisions? Is it, if this legislation passes, you'll then engage in a rulemaking process, or is there a task force working on this?
There's no task force at this point, but so there's no discussion been about what that stakeholder engagement process will look like, but there will be stakeholder engagement throughout all of this. When we amend our waivers or our state plan or promulgate rules, there are very formal public input periods for those. We've also done, depending on what work is done, stakeholder engagement across the state, where we say we're holding a meeting in Greeley at this location to discuss this topic, please come. So I see lots of those kinds of avenues happening throughout this process.
So if we have questions or concerns, how do we get those to you?
Next slide, please. My contact information is up here, and Heather Fladmark, who is our conflict-free case management specialist, is also on here. So please, we welcome feedback, we welcome input. We want to be working with all of you throughout all these changes and these processes, so please email us.
Great. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
making the trip and bringing this information.
Thank you.
to our group. So now we're looking at approving the minutes from the last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
Frank and Lisa, second. All those, any questions? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Aye.
Great, thanks. The minutes are approved. PAC bylaws. Yes.
a quick, I guess, point of clarity. There were some additional people that joined after introductions. Can you say who they are?
Okay. Sure. Maureen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, sure, sorry. Hi, my name is Maureen Welch. I'm a parent and I'm a volunteer activist. No one pays me to be here, no job. Take care of my son, CNA, and here he is in 2D form. He's much better behaved in 2 dimension. And I'm very concerned about APS. And I also just had one question. I'm sorry I missed public comments. We were trying to get something to eat since the meeting this morning, but I'm just curious where the information for this pack is posted, because I couldn't find it anywhere online. I'm a big proponent of transparency and access for public, because if it weren't for kids like James, a lot of your jobs wouldn't exist. So I'd always like to bring him with me so that we remind us why we're here. So thank you very much.
And Emily, do you want to share how you post the
As far as Emily and Chantel, we also help answer that. I was going to respond to your email yesterday. The agenda is on the public calendar, and I know, do you want to expand a little bit more about what we were talking about as far as PAC information?
Sure, yeah, so the agenda is posted on the public website. And then there are materials on the back wall here as well.
And how about materials that you use in past meetings?
We don't post those publicly.
Okay, and the minutes?
The
The minutes by public Open Records Act are available on request, so I'd like to get copies of the past year's minutes. Thank you.
I gotta get lunch too. My name is Tawny Couch. I'm also a parent of a child, well, an adult child with IDD. And I'm just very interested in what's going on with the APS and conflict-free management. And sort of with her, I want to know what you guys are up to. You're employed by the government. We have the right to